Okay, in this video, I'm going to be working through the problems from the Unit 3 mini test review that can be found on Delta Math. All right, let's look at this first question. It says the number of gallons of gas that a car uses varies directly with the number of miles it travels. A car travels 46 miles and used up 2 3/10 gallons of gas. What is the direct variation equation for this problem? And the second question, how many gallons of gas will the car use if traveled 64 miles? Okay, so let's start with, first of all, when you hear direct variation, we do have an equation that we use. If you remember, it is y equals kx. That means y varies directly with x. All right, but this is just the equation for direct variation, but we're going to use this situation. So this says that a car traveled 46 miles and used up 2.3 gallons of gas. So for this equation, we have 46 miles is equal to k times 2.3. Now we can solve for k by dividing by 2.3. We do that on both sides. So when we work that out, k is going to equal 20. Because when we divide, 46 divided by 2.3 is 20. So now we know that k equals 20, so we can plug that into our equation up here. And then our equation for this specific problem is going to be y equals 20x. And the second part of the question says, how many gallons of gas will the car use if it traveled 64 miles? So we're just going to plug 64 into our equation and determine what the x is, which is the number of gallons. All right, so we would just put y equals, actually, instead of y, we would put the 64 miles equals 20x. And if we want to solve for x, we divide by 20. And 64 divided by 20 is 3.2. So x would equal 3.2, or that is how many gallons of gas for this specific situation. All right, let's take a look at this one. It says the graph of a linear function is represented below. Identify the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and slope of the graph, and the zero of the function. All right, so let's remember some things here. The x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. The y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. If you want to find the slope is the difference in the y, the difference in the y's and the difference in the x. We also think of slope as being equal to the rise over the run, or we could call it the change in y over the change in x. All right, but if we were just looking on this, we would need to go up 2 units and over 4 units. So we have a rise of 2 and a run of 4, but we would simplify that to 1/2. So the slope equals 1/2. You go up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, and so on. So slope is 1/2. All right, the x-intercept, let's go and just write that out. The x-intercept, I'm going to abbreviate. That is right here where it crosses, where the graph crosses the x-axis. It is at 8, 0. We just call the x-intercept 8. All right, and then if we talk about the y-intercept, that's where the graph crosses the y-axis. This is the y-axis, so the graph crosses it here at -4. So the y-intercept is -4. 4. If you were putting those in coordinates again, the x-intercept would be at 8, 0, and the y-intercept would be at 0, -4. All right, and then finally the 0. The 0 is really the same thing as the x-intercept. When we plug in an 8 to this function, or when our x value, our domain is 8, our range or our output is 0. So the 0 of this function is 8. All right, 8. Or again, is as a coordinate, it is 8, 0. All right. All right, this problem says, what are the equation and slope of the line shown on the coordinate grid? All right, so here's the coordinate grid. We have the y-axis and the x-axis, and you see this line down here. This is our graph. It is a horizontal line, all right? So let's remember the phrase that we have, hoy bucks. So H-O-Y, and then V-U-X. Just as a reminder, the H stands for horizontal. This O actually represents 0 for 0 slope, and then the equation is going to be y equals something. And then when we have a vertical line, vertical, the slope is called undefined, and the equation is x equals something. So here, our line is horizontal, so we do know that the slope is going to equal 0 or 0. It's a 0 slope, okay? But now remember that we could find that by finding the change in y over the change in x, okay? And you'll notice that the y is always -5 in this, on this graph. All these points have a -5, so up here, we would subtract -5 minus -5, which would be +5, and we would end up with 0. So when you have 0 in the numerator, you have the 0 slope. All right, and then as far as the equation, y is always equal to the -5, so that is our equation. So we have a 0 slope and an equation of y equals -5. All right, let's take a look at this one. The value of y is directly proportional to x. If y equals 45 when x equals 89, then what's the value of y when x equals 41? So remember, when we talk about directly proportional or direct variation, we have the equation y equals kx. All right, well, we also know that if we solve this equation for k, then we would divide both sides by x. So now it says y divided by x equals k. So the y is directly proportional to the x, and this is our equation. So if y equals 45 and x equals 89, then what's the value of y when x equals 41? Well, let's go ahead and plug in our values here. So we would say when y is 45 and x is 89, then that equals k. So we would plug that into an equation, y equals kx, so we'd say y equals 45 over 89 times x. And if we know that x equals 41, then we can continue working out that equation. Y equals 45 over 89 times 41. And when you work that out, you're going to get y equals 20.73. You can round that. 20.73. All right, moving on. This question says, what is the slope of the graph of y equals 1/2 x minus b. All right, this graph is in what's called slope-intercept form, okay? And we also write that out as y equals mx plus b, where the m, or the coefficient in front of the x, is the slope, and then the b is the y-intercept, okay? But if this just asks for the slope, then the slope is very simply the 1/2. So the slope of this one, m equals 1/2. All right. This question says, what is the slope of the line that passes through the points 4, 8, and 2, 12? Write your answer in simplest form. So we're just looking for the slope. What is the slope, okay? So remember, the slope is equal to the change in y over the change in x. We do have a formula that we use. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, okay? So let's go ahead and label. We can call this first one x1 and y1, and then we'll call this second one x2 and y2. All right, so if we just plug that in, then we're going to simply do 12. We're going to start with 12 y2 minus y1, 12 minus 8. So 12 minus 8 over, and then since this was y2, we have x2 minus x1, so 2 minus 4. So 2 minus 4. When we work that out, in the numerator, or 12 minus 8 is going to be 4 over, and then 2 minus 4 is -2. Now we're going to simplify this. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and remember that we have a negative here. So 4 over -2 is equal to -2. So the slope is -2. All right, that'll be the end of this first part of the Unit 3 mini review.